The first time I saw Commander Vaeth'ra stumble through the dimensional gate, half dead and dragging something behind her, I thought she'd finally lost what little sanity she had left. Let me be clear. Vaeth'ra was never particularly stable to begin with. She was the kind of officer who'd volunteer for suicide missions, just to avoid the paperwork of a normal deployment. So when High Command approved her expedition into the void between spaces, the place where reality goes to die, we all figured we'd seen the last of her. We were wrong. The gate materialized in Hangar 7 with all the grace of a drunk pilot attempting a barrel roll, sparks flying, klaxons screaming, and half the technicians diving for cover because, honestly, who knew what kind of nightmare was about to crawl out? The void doesn't give back what it takes. Everyone knows this. It's the first thing they teach you at the academy. Right after "don't lick the antimatter" and "humans are a myth." Except, apparently, humans aren't a myth. Vaeth'ra collapsed onto the deck plating. Her exosuit scorched and leaking fluids I really hoped were just coolant. Behind her, still connected by what looked like a makeshift tether made from her own equipment cables, was, well, I didn't know what the hell it was. Bipedal. Sure. Wearing some kind of primitive environment suit that looked like it had been assembled by a child with access to duct tape and delusions of competence. But the way it moved, smooth, calculated, scanning the hangar with these dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, that sent every instinct I had screaming in 17 different dialects. "Medical team to Hangar 7, I barked into my comm. Because protocol exists for a reason, even when your brain is trying to process the impossible. And get a containment unit ready. I don't know what we've got. The thing, the human, as I'd soon learn, knelt beside Vaeth'ra and did something with her helmet's seals. Its movements were precise, almost surgical, and when Vaeth'ra's helmet came off, she was laughing. Not the relieved laughter of someone who just escaped death. No, this was the unhinged cackle of someone who'd stared into the abyss, and the abyss had told her a really good joke. "Lieutenant Kresh," she wheezed, her three eyes focusing on me with disturbing intensity. "Meet Takoda. He saved my life, approximately." She paused, coughed up something purple. 47 times. Give or take. Takoda. The human had a name. Of course it did. The medical team arrived, led by Dr. Zimri, who took one look at the situation and made a sound I'd never heard from a Vaelthian before, somewhere between a startled gasp and existential dread. "Commander, what in the name of the eternal void is that?" "A human," Vaeth'ra said, as if she'd just announced the cafeteria was serving meatloaf. "From Earth, which, surprise, actually exists." The hangar went quiet. You could have heard a plasma bolt drop. Humans were stories. Cautionary tales we told junior officers about the dangers of hubris and genetic experimentation. They were the species that supposedly evolved on a death world so hostile that their idea of pleasant weather would liquefy most known life forms. They were the ones who'd supposedly fought off 3 separate extinction events before developing spaceflight. They were myths. Propaganda. Fever dreams of overly creative xenobiologists with too much time and too many stimulants. Except one was standing in our hangar, calm as anything, watching us with the patient wariness of a predator in unfamiliar territory. "Impossible," Zimri said, which was rich coming from someone who'd once successfully performed brain surgery on themselves during a critical shortage of anesthetics. "Humans went extinct, the Cascade event. Didn't kill them all," Vaeth'ra interrupted. "Just scattered them. Takoda here was in stasis. Has been for about... How long did you say?" "The human," Takoda spoke. His voice came through a translation device jury-rigged to his suit, and it had this quality to it. Like gravel mixed with honey. 843 years, give or take a decade. The chronometer wasn't exactly precise. 800 years. "I've lived for 90 cycles and I'm considered middle-aged." This creature had been frozen in time for nearly a millennium, and he said it with all the emotional weight of someone reporting the weather. "Right," I said, because someone had to maintain some semblance of command presence, even if internally I was having what the humans would probably call an existential crisis. "Dr. Zimri, get the commander to medical. Containment protocols for our guest." Takoda's head turned toward me with that unnatural smoothness again. I'm not going into a cage. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even particularly aggressive. It was just a statement of fact. The same way you might say water is wet or the void is cold. But something in his tone made it very clear that attempting to cage him would end poorly for everyone involved. Vaeth'ra laughed again. Don't bother, Kresh. I tried that in the void 3 times. He got out in under 2 minutes each time, and on the 3rd attempt he picked the lock with a piece of his own tooth. A tooth. It was a molar, Takoda added helpfully. And technically I only used a fragment. This was insane. This was beyond insane. This was so far past insane that insane was a distant memory viewed through the wrong end of a telescope. Fine, I said, because arguing seemed pointless and I was fresh out of protocol for this situation. But he's your responsibility, Commander. And if he eats anyone, humans are omnivores, not carnivores, Takoda interrupted, and I swear I could hear Asiamum in his mechanically translated voice. And I prefer my food cooked. Your crew is safe. Probably. That probably hung in the air like a plasma grenade with a faulty timer. The next few hours were a blur of reports, briefings, and increasingly frantic messages from High Command, demanding to know why our sensors were detecting biological signatures that supposedly didn't exist. Admiral Korath himself showed up via holocom, his fur standing on end in what I'd learned to recognize as profound agitation. Explain, he growled, his image flickering in the command center. Vaeth'ra, freshly bandaged and hopped up on enough stimulants to kill a lesser species, grinned. We found a human, sir. A real, actual human. In a derelict colony ship floating in the void. That's impossible, so I've been told. Multiple times. By multiple people. And yet, she gestured to observation window where Takoda was being subjected to what could charitably be called a medical examination, and more accurately be described as a circus. Zimri had assembled half the science department, and they were all staring at the human like he was the most fascinating thing in the universe. Which, to be fair, he probably was. Admiral Korath leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. And you brought it aboard my station, without authorization, without proper quarantine protocols. With respect, sir, he wouldn't fit in quarantine. He's adapted to void exposure. His biology has been altered. Enhanced. I'm not even sure our containment fields would hold him if he decided to leave. This was not helping my stress levels. Takoda, for his part, was being remarkably patient with the poking and prodding. He'd removed his helmet, revealing features that were simultaneously familiar and alien. 2 eyes instead of 3 or 4. Hair that grew from his scalp in this wild, dark mass. Skin that was this warm brown shade that seemed to shift in the light. His face was expressive in ways I'd never seen before, capable of conveying emotions with the tiniest movements. Right now, he looked amused. Your doctor just asked if my skeleton is internal or external, he said, his voice carrying across the observation bay. Should I be concerned about the quality of your medical education? Zimri made a huffing sound. Human anatomy hasn't been studied in living specimens for over 2,000 years. Forgive us for being thorough. Thorough is fine. But if that scanner goes anywhere near my... It's a standard cellular analysis probe, Zimri interrupted. I know what it is. I also know what you're about to try to scan with it. And I'm telling you, that's not happening. Even through the observation glass, I could see Zimri's ears flatten in embarrassment. Humans, it seemed, had boundaries. Good to know. Admiral Korath was still talking, something about protocols and procedures and why didn't anyone follow proper channels anymore, but I'd stopped listening. Because Takoda had turned and was looking directly at me through the observation window, not at the room in general. At me specifically. His eyes met mine, and I felt something I hadn't felt since my first combat deployment. Genuine, primal fear. Not because he looked threatening, but because he looked at me the way I might look at a puzzle I was trying to solve. Like he was calculating, measuring, assessing. Then he smiled. Humans have too many teeth. That was my first coherent thought. My second was that his smile didn't reach his eyes. Not entirely, and that disconnect was somehow more unsettling than if he'd just bared his teeth in an obvious threat display. Lieutenant, Vaeth'ra said. appearing beside me with the stealth of someone who'd spent too much time in special operations. "You're going to want to sit down for this next part."
What next part?
"The part where I explain what we found in the void, and why Takoda insisted on coming back with me." She paused, her expression going serious in a way I'd rarely seen. "The void isn't empty, Kresh, it's full, and something out there is very, very interested in us." "What kind of something?" She looked at Takoda, who was now arguing with Zimri about the theoretical limits of human endurance in hard vacuum. "The kind that makes humans look like the friendly option." Oh no, the convergence is coming," she continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That's what the human archives called it. The last time it happened, it wiped out 90% of all sentient species in this galaxy. The humans survived because they did something desperate, something that broke the laws of physics and sanity in equal measure. And Takoda? He's one of the survivors, one of the enhanced. The humans who volunteered to become weapons, living, breathing, thinking weapons designed to fight things that make our worst nightmares look like pleasant daydreams." She turned to look at me fully. "He came back with me because the signs are showing again. The void is thinning. Reality is starting to fray at the edges. And we have maybe 5 years before it all comes cursing down." I stared at her, then at Takoda, then back at her. "This is a joke. Please tell me this is an elaborate joke." "I wish it was." She pulled out a data chip and pressed it into my hand. "This contains everything we found: archived data, historical records, weapons specifications, battle plans from a war we didn't know we'd already lost once." Her eyes were haunted. "Show it to the Admiral. Show it to High Command. Show it to anyone who'll listen. Because if we don't prepare, if we don't take this seriously..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Takoda had stopped arguing with Zimri and was watching us again. This time when he smiled, it was different. Sad, almost. Like he knew exactly what we were talking about and had already accepted what was coming. "You get used to it," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the space between us. "The fear, the uncertainty, the knowledge that you're fighting something you can't possibly beat." He paused. "But you fight anyway. Because that's what sentient beings do. We rage against the dying of the light. We spit in the face of extinction. We survive." The briefing room felt too small for the weight of what we were about to discuss. Admiral Korath had arrived in person, never a good sign, along with Commander Vaeth'ra, Dr. Zimri, myself, and against my better judgment, Takoda. The human sat at the end of the conference table like he belonged there. His posture relaxed but his eyes constantly moving, tracking every detail of the room. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," Admiral Korath said, his claws tapping against the table in a rhythm that spoke of barely controlled agitation. "You're telling me that in approximately 5 years, reality itself is going to tear apart and unleash horrors from beyond space and time. And our best hope for survival is a single human who's been frozen for 8 centuries. "Not our best hope," Vaeth'ra corrected. "Our only reference point. Takoda knows how they fought the Convergence last time. He was there. I was 17, Takoda said quietly. When they came, we called it first contact. But that implies communication. What we got was annihilation. They didn't want to talk. They didn't want our resources. They wanted," he paused, searching for words. "They wanted to unmake us, to erase us from existence so thoroughly that the universe would forget we'd ever been here." Dr. Zimri leaned forward, her scientific curiosity apparently overriding her sense of self-preservation. "But you survived. Humanity survived. Some of us did, not many." Takoda's expression went distant. "There were 12 billion humans when the Convergence began. By the time we pushed them back into the void, there were fewer than 3 million of us left. And we only won because we became something else." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing skin that looked normal at first glance. Then he did something, flexed something internal, and the skin rippled, hardened, turned into what looked like organic armor plating that gleamed with an oily iridescence. Every alarm in my tactical brain started screaming. "Adaptive biology," Zimri breathed. Your cells can restructure themselves at will, among other things. Takoda let his arm return to normal. The enhancement program rewrote human genetics from the ground up. We became faster, stronger, more resilient. We could survive in environments that would kill baseline humans in seconds. We could interface directly with technology. We could perceive dimensions of reality that most species can't even conceptualize. He looked at each of us in turn. But the real change was psychological. They made us into weapons that could think, adapt, overcome. They removed our limiters, the biological and psychological safeguards that keep most species from self-destructing. That sounds horrifying, I said. Because someone had to say it. Takoda's laugh was bitter. It was. I've had 800 years in stasis to think about what we became, what we had to become. He stood up, began pacing. The entities that come through during the convergence, they don't think like us. They don't perceive reality like us. Fighting them isn't about superior firepower or better tactics. It's about being willing to break every rule, cross every line, sacrifice everything to survive one more day. Admiral Korath's fur was standing completely on end now. And you expect us to do the same? To turn ourselves into monsters to fight monsters? No, Takoda said simply. I expect you to lose. Badly. Unless you're willing to let me help you prepare. The silence that followed was deafening. What do you propose? Korath asked finally. Takoda pulled out a datapad, one of ours, which he'd apparently figured out how to use in the few hours since coming aboard. First, we need to map the weak points where reality is already starting to fray. The convergence doesn't happen all at once. It builds. Slowly at first, then faster. There will be incursions, small tears in space-time where things slip through. We can use these to prepare, to learn, to adapt our defense. And second, we need to find the other humans. He pulled up a star map, highlighting several dozen points scattered across 3 sectors. Before Earth fell, we scattered. Colony ships, research stations, military outposts. Most were destroyed or lost. But some survived, some went into hiding, into stasis, waiting for the all-clear signal that never came. He looked at Vaeth'ra, that derelict ship where she found me. It wasn't alone. The logs showed an entire fleet that jumped into the void together. Most didn't make it, but some might have. You want us to mount a rescue operation into the void? I said flatly. The place that literally drives people insane. The place we've lost 17 expeditions in the last decade alone. I want you to save yourselves, Takoda corrected. Enhanced humans are weapons. But weapons need wielders. Your species, all the species in the Galactic Council, you have knowledge, resources, technology we never developed. Together we might actually stand a chance. Dr. Zimri was already pulling up data. The energy signatures we've been detecting at the edges of charted space, the ones we attributed to natural phenomena, are tiers forming, Takoda confirmed. Small ones now, barely noticeable. But they're growing, and each one is a potential entry point. He manipulated the star map, overlaying new data. In 3 months, one of these tiers will be large enough for a scout-class entity to slip through. I'd suggest we be ready to meet it. With what? Korath demanded. Our weapons are designed for conventional warfare. Energy-based combat. Physical projectiles. You're describing enemies that exist partially outside normal space-time. Takoda smiled, and this time it was genuine. Then we'll teach you to fight dirty, human style. He turned to Vaeth'ra. You said your ship has a fabrication bay. 2 of them, actually. Good. I'll need access. And a team of engineers who aren't afraid to try things that seem impossible. He looked at me. And Lieutenant Kresh here as a tactical liaison. Someone who can translate my combat experience into something your military structure can actually use. Me? I said, somewhat less professionally than I'd intended. Why me? Because you're scared of me. But you're still here. Still listening, still trying to figure out if I'm a threat or an asset. His dark eyes fixed on mine. That's the kind of thinking we need. Healthy paranoia combined with pragmatic flexibility. I looked at Admiral Korath, who looked like he was seriously reconsidering his life choices. Finally, he's shy. I'm going to regret this. I can feel it in my bones. But proceed. Limited access to facilities. Constant monitoring. And if anything goes wrong, I'll be the first one in danger, Takoda said. I have no interest in harming anyone aboard this station, but I won't let you face what's coming unprepared. I've seen entire civilizations wiped out because they refused to believe the threat was real until it was too late. I won't watch it happen again. The next 3 months were chaos. Controlled chaos, mostly, but chaos, nonetheless. Takoda threw himself into preparations with an intensity that bordered on obsessive. He worked 16-hour days, training combat teams, designing weapons, analyzing the tears in space-time that were appearing with increasing frequency. And he talked, constantly, about Earth, about the war, about the things he'd seen. Sometimes I thought he talked just to remind himself he was still sane, still human, despite everything the enhancement had done to him. We had a saying, he told me one night in the observation deck, watching the stars wheel by. We'd write it on our weapons, our armor, anywhere we could. Terra Invicta, Earth unconquered. He laughed softly. Stupid, really. Earth was very conquered, very destroyed. But the idea behind it, the refusal to surrender, the absolute stubborn insistence on surviving, that's what kept us going. Do you miss it? Earth? He was quiet for a long time. Every day. Every hour. I miss seasons. I miss rain. I miss the smell of grass after a storm and the taste of coffee and the sound of music that wasn't designed to be mathematically perfect. He turned to look at me. But Earth is gone. Has been for a long time. What I miss most is the people. My family. My friends. Everyone who didn't make it into stasis. His voice dropped. I dream about them sometimes. Wonder if they'd recognize what I've become. You're still human, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Am I? He flexed his hand, and I watched the bones restructure themselves, the fingers elongating before returning to normal. I can survive hard vacuum. I can interface with alien computer systems by touch. I can see in spectrums of light that don't have names in your language. I heal from injuries that would kill anyone else. I'm stronger, faster, more durable than any baseline human who ever lived. He met my eyes. At what point does enhanced become no longer human? I didn't have an answer for that. I'm not sure anyone did. The first incursion happened exactly when Takoda predicted. A tier opened in the Deneb sector, and Sunton came through. The sensor data was garbled. Our instruments couldn't quite capture what they were seeing, because the entity existed partially outside normal space. But we saw enough. It was massive. Fluid. Changing. One moment it looked almost organic. The next, like a geometric impossibility made manifest. It moved through space like a shark through water, and everywhere it passed, reality glitched, stars flickered, space bent, time stuttered. Takoda was already suited up before the alarm finished sounding. Now we see if this works, he muttered, checking the weapons we'd built, a hybrid of Galactic Council technology and human desperation. The battle lasted 47 minutes. 47 minutes of absolute chaos where normal tactics meant nothing, and every assumption we had about combat was proven wrong. Our energy weapons passed right through the entity like it wasn't there. Our missiles exploded harmlessly in space that had stopped following normal physics. Then Takoda engaged. I watched from the command center as he launched from the fighter bay. No ship, no vehicle, just himself in a combat suit that seemed to flow around him like liquid metal. He moved through space with impossible grace, dodging attacks that bent reality around them. And when he struck back, his weapons actually connected, tore chunks from the entity that screamed in frequencies that made our sensors overload. He fought like nothing I'd ever seen. Brutal, efficient, creative in ways that bordered on artistic. He used the entity's own nature against it, led it into spatial distortions, exploited weaknesses that shouldn't have existed. And when he finally killed it, drove a resonance weapon straight into what passed for its core. The thing came apart in a cascade of impossible light and vanished back into whatever dimension it had crawled from. Takoda returned to the station 3 hours later, his suit damaged but already repairing itself, his body covered in wounds that were healing before our eyes. He looked exhausted, triumphant, haunted. "One down," he said as Dr. Zimri began examining him. "Approximately 4,000 to go." 4,000? I repeated weakly. "Give or take. Depending on how long the convergence lasts this time." He winced as Zimri probed a particularly nasty wound. "But now you've seen one. You know they can be killed. And more importantly, you know how to kill them." He was right. The data from the battle was already being analyzed, disseminated, turned into new training protocols and weapon designs. We'd proven it was possible to fight back, to survive. Over the next weeks, more tiers opened. More entities came through. And each time, we were a little more prepared, a little more effective. Takoda trained 5 of our best pilots, Nira, Kelvin, Zasha, Run, and Isko, in his fighting style, and they became the core of what we started calling the Void Hunters. But the real breakthrough came when Vaeth'ra's deep space probes detected something unexpected, a signal, faint, degraded, but unmistakably human in origin. Coming from a derelict station in the void. "Could be another stasis ship," Takoda said, studying the data. "Could be a trap. Could be a ghost signal from something that died centuries ago." He looked at Vaeth'ra. "Only one way to find out." She grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that." They launched 3 days later, Vaeth'ra, Takoda, and a team of specialists including Dr. Zimri and myself. The jump into the void was exactly as horrifying as advertised. Reality twisted. Time became suggestions. I saw things in the darkness between spaces that I'm still not entirely convinced were real. But we found the station, and inside, in cryopods that had somehow survived 800 years, we found them. 47 humans. Enhanced, like Takoda. Warriors, scientists, engineers, a crew that had gone into the void to hide and wait. When we woke them, their first question was whether Earth had survived. Takoda had to tell them the truth. Some cried. Some raged. One, a woman named Indira with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, just laughed and laughed until Takoda held her and whispered something I couldn't hear. "Family?" I asked later. "Found family," he corrected. "We went through enhancement together, fought together, bled together." When you share that kind of trauma, that kind of transformation, you become something more than friends. He watched as the newly awakened humans were integrated into our operations. I thought I was the last. Thought I'd face this alone. But now you have backup. Now we have a chance. The 47 humans changed everything. They brought knowledge, experience, and most importantly, hope. With their help, we started winning. Started pushing back. We established a perimeter, sealed some of the larger tiers, developed weapons and tactics that actually worked. 6 months after Takoda stumbled through that gate, half dead and dragging hope behind him, we held a ceremony. Admiral Korath officially created the Convergence Response Fleet, a joint operation between the Galactic Council and the enhanced humans. Takoda was offered command, but he turned it down. "I'm a weapon," he said, "not a commander. Let me do what I do best." He looked at me. "Besides, Kresh here is a better strategic thinker than I'll ever be," which is how I found myself promoted to fleet commander. In charge of preparing for a war most of the galaxy still didn't believe was coming. But we knew. We'd seen the truth. And we were ready. "Think we can actually win this?" I asked Takoda one night. Reviewing deployment schedules, he was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Last time we didn't win. We just survived long enough for the convergence to end. Bought ourselves a temporary reprieve." He looked at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something other than grim determination in his eyes. I saw hope. But this time is different. This time we're not alone. This time we have allies, resources, preparation. This time we rage against the dying of the light, I finished. He smiled. Exactly. We spit in the face of extinction. We survive. He raised his glass, filled with something that would probably kill anyone who wasn't enhanced. Terra Invicta. I raised mine in return. Terra Invicta. And all the other worlds too. All the worlds, he agreed. Outside the observation window, stars wheeled by in their eternal dance, unaware of the storm gathering at the edges of reality. But we were aware, we were watching. And when the convergence came in full force, we would be ready. Not because we were the strongest, not because we had the best weapons, but because we had something the entities from beyond space-time would never understand. The absolute stubborn refusal to surrender. The human spirit of defiance in the face of impossible odds. The willingness to stand together and fight no matter the cost. The void might be full of horrors. Reality might be fraying at the edges. The convergence might be edible, but so were we. And that, I realized, watching Takoda laugh at something Vaeth'ra said while the enhanced humans integrated seamlessly with our crew, was the most terrifying weapon in the universe. Not claws or teeth or adaptive biology. Not weapons that bent reality or ships that could traverse dimensions. Hope. The belief that tomorrow could be better than today. No matter how dark the night, the convergence was coming. And we would be ready. Together. Human and alien, fighting side by side signed the dying of the light. Terra Invicta, indeed.